Sprinting to save a little girl from danger had my heart racing, but stepping into her grandmother's mansion stopped it cold. On the wall hung an old photo of a man who looked like me, but belonged to another era. Who was he? The truth that followed would haunt me forever. Get a cup of coffee and settle down because this story is inspiring from start to finish. Make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. Not much happens in my neighborhood just outside the city. The streets are quiet, lined with maple trees and modest homes, their weathered shingles telling stories of decades gone by. The autumn air carries the sweet scent of decaying leaves, nature's reminder that everything changes. At least, that's what I thought until that crisp October afternoon when a simple trip to the grocery store changed everything. As I walked home with my bags, I spotted a little girl, no older than 6, sitting in the middle of the road. She was crying over her scraped knee while her bicycle lay on its side, its wheel still spinning lazily in the afternoon light. My heart stopped when I saw where she was sitting, right before that notorious curve where drivers always speed, their tires squealing against the asphalt like angry cats. The sound of an approaching engine made my blood run cold. Hey, watch out! I dropped my groceries, eggs cracking with a wet splat as the bag hit the pavement, the oranges rolling away like escaping prisoners. But none of that mattered. I sprinted toward her, my feet barely touching the ground, lungs burning with each breath. Time seemed to slow, the world narrowing to just me and this child in danger. The engine roared closer, its growl growing more menacing with each passing second. I scooped her up just as a red sedan whipped around the corner, the rush of air from its passing ruffling our clothes, missing us by inches. The driver didn't even slow down, leaving only the acrid smell of burnt rubber in their wake. The little girl clung to my jacket like a lifeline, her tears soaking through to my shirt, creating dark patches that matched my racing heart. "My knee hurts," she whimpered, her voice small and broken. "I'm scared. I'm so scared." Her fingers dug into my shoulders, seeking comfort in their grip. "I know, sweetheart. I know," I said, gently stroking her hair. "You're safe now. I got you. Nothing's going to hurt you. What's your name?" I pulled back slightly to look at her tear-stained face, her eyes wide with lingering fear. "Evie," she sniffled, wiping her nose with her sleeve. A purple butterfly barrette hung crookedly in her disheveled brown hair. "Evia, imloun. Where are your parents?" I asked, helping her stand on shaky legs. She pointed down the street, hiccuping between words. "Mommy," she drove away. I tried to follow her on my bike, but I fell, and she didn't see me, and her voice broke completely, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Which house is yours?" I asked softly, crouching down to her level. "The big one." She sniffled again, twisting the hem of her pink sweater between her fingers. "With the black gate. Grandma's watching me today. I wasn't supposed to leave, but I just wanted to see Mommy." I helped her up, retrieved her bike, a pink and white affair with streamers dangling from the handlebars, and walked beside her as she limped along, her small hand gripping mine tightly. The big house turned out to be an enormous mansion that made the rest of the neighborhood look like dollhouses, its stone facade glowing warmly in the late afternoon sun. When we reached the ornate iron gate, Evie pressed a button on the intercom with trembling fingers. "Grandma, it's me." Her voice cracked with fresh tears, echoing slightly in the metal speaker. The gate buzzed open immediately with a deep metallic groan, and an elderly woman rushed out the front door, her silver hair catching the sunlight like spun moonbeams, her face etched with worry lines deep as river valleys. "Evie, where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." She wrapped the girl in a fierce hug, her manicured hands clutching desperately at Evie's sweater. I looked away for 1 minute, and you were gone. I've been calling everywhere. I fell. Evie mumbled into her grandmother's shoulder, fresh tears welling up and spilling over. I wanted to catch up to Mommy, but oh, darling. The woman kissed her granddaughter's forehead, then looked up at me with eyes swimming with gratitude. Thank you for bringing her home. I'm Vivienne. Please come in and have some tea while I tend to her knee. Please. Her voice carried the refined accent of old money, but genuine warmth underlay it. Inside, Vivienne cleaned Evie's scrape with gentle hands while I sat awkwardly on an antique sofa that probably cost more than my monthly salary, its burgundy velvet soft beneath my fingers. The mansion's interior was like something from a movie, crystal chandeliers throwing rainbow prisms across the walls, oil paintings in gilt frames watching us with ancient eyes, and Persian rugs so thick my feet sank into them like fresh snow. There now, darling. All better? Vivienne placed a plaster with prancing unicorns on Evie's knee. Evie nodded, already distracted by her tablet, the screen's glow reflecting in her still damp eyes. Can I go play, Grandma? I want to show Uncle Logan my room later. Her voice had regained its childish enthusiasm. I smiled at being called uncle so quickly by this child I'd just met, warmth spreading through my chest at the innocent acceptance. Of course, dear, but stay inside this time, Vivienne said firmly, her voice carrying an edge of lingering fear. Promise me? No more adventures today. I promise. Evie hopped down and hugged my legs with surprising strength. Thank you for saving me, Logan. You're my hero. As Evie skipped away, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor, Vivienne turned to thank me. But the words died on her lips when she looked closely at me. She stared at me like she'd seen a ghost, her face draining of color until it matched her pearls. Her hand clutched the back of a chair, knuckles white with tension. Mom, I skiftet uncomfortably under her intense gaze. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Without answering, she grabbed my wrist and pulled me down the hallway, her heels clicking rapidly on the polished floor. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone her age, urgent and almost desperate. We stopped in front of a wall covered in old photographs, generations of faces in ornate frames, their eyes following us through time. My eyes swept over the faces until I froze at one particular picture. Wait, what is this? I stepped closer to a photo in a black frame, my heart suddenly pounding against my ribs. That's impossible. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned in closer. The man in the photograph could have been my twin. The resemblance was so striking it was almost supernatural. The same dark eyes with their slight tilt at the corners, the same sharp jawline that could cut glass, and the same slight smile playing at the edges of his mouth. Even the way he tilted his head matched my mannerisms perfectly. But his clothes belonged to another era entirely, a perfectly tailored suit from decades past. Who is he? Vivienne's hands trembled as she touched the frame, her fingers tracing the edge like a blind woman reading Braille. My brother, Henry. Her voice cracked on the name. Your brother? He vanished 50 years ago. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, trying to hold back tears. We never knew what happened to him. The police searched for months, but nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air, taking all our answers with him. We sat in her study, the photo between us on an antique coffee table inlaid with mother of pearl. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming against leaded glass windows like impatient fingers. Tell me about him, I said, leaning forward in my leather chair. Please. Everything you remember. Every detail matters now. Vivienne twisted her wedding ring, lost in memories that seemed to play across her face like an old film. Henry was complicated, brilliant when he applied himself, charming when he wanted to be. He could light up a room just by walking into it. But he hated responsibility and chafed against every rule. She paused. Our father wanted him to take over the family business. We owned half the factories in town back then. But Henry, she shook her head, her silver hair catching the lamplight. He just wanted to party and live freely. Said life was too short for boardrooms and balance sheets. Said he was suffocating in our father's shadow. What happened after that? Father gave him an ultimatum. Step up or get cut off. When Henry chose freedom over his inheritance, our father followed through. Henry exploded, leaving a horrible letter calling him a tyrant and disappearing into the night. His last words were that he'd rather run away than become our father. And you never heard from him again? Not a word. She studied my face with intensity, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I was 16 when he left. I kept expecting him to show up at my wedding or when father died, but he never did. Just silence year after year. She leaned forward, her hand reaching across the space between us. What about your father? What do you know about him? I let out a bitter laugh, running my fingers through my hair. Nothing. He left when I was 3. Mom never talked about him. She'd just get angry if I asked, her face going dark like storm clouds. Said he was a coward who couldn't handle being a father. She died last year. Took all her secrets with her to the grave. Vivian nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the frame with a tenderness that spoke of years of memories. After a pause, I asked softly, "But if your brother was so bad, why did you keep his photo?" Her eyes softened, tears gathering at the corners as she looked at the photo again. Because love doesn't vanish with disappointment, Logan. He was my brother. When our mother died, he'd sit with me for hours, just holding my hand. He wasn't perfect. Yes, he ran from responsibility, chased pleasure over purpose, but she took a shaky breath. When we were young, his laugh could light up the darkest room. He had this warmth about him that made you feel safe. I was so young then, seeing the world in black and white. Now with age, I understand that people aren't just good or bad. They're human. In my heart, he's not the man who ran away. He's the brother who taught me to ride a bike, who scared away my nightmares. He's just someone who lost his way while trying to find himself. Logan, she reached for my hand, her fingers warm against mine. I know this may sound crazy. Would you consider taking a DNA test? I know it's a lot to ask, but the resemblance between you and Henry is uncanny. It's almost like you're his mirror image. I was stunned. The request was out of the blue, but the quiet desperation in her eyes intrigued me. Maybe this could be the key to the answers I sought. I agreed to the test, and she took care of the arrangements. 2 weeks later, I stood in Vivian's study again, holding the test results in hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The paper crinkled softly, each sound like a thunderclap in the quiet room. That MY hands shook as I read the words that rewrote my entire life story. The rainy afternoon that brought me here seemed like a lifetime ago, yet as fresh as yesterday. I can't believe it, Vivian whispered, tears streaming down her face, catching the light like diamonds. All this time, Henry was your father. You're my nephew. Your family. Evie bounded into the room, clutching a stuffed unicorn with a rainbow mane. Grandma, can we have cookies? Logan promised to see my new dollhouse. Her eyes sparkled with childish excitement, unaware of the momentous revelation hanging in the air. Vivian pulled her close, wiping her eyes with a trembling hand. Of course, darling. But first, I'd like you to meet someone very special. Remember how you called Logan Uncle before? Well, he really is your Uncle Logan. He's part of our family. Really. Evie's eyes widened like saucers, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. Like, for real and true? I knelt down to her level, my eyes misting over. For real and true, princess. For real and true. I stood there feeling pieces of my identity clicking into place like a long-forgotten puzzle. And suddenly, everything made sense. Family isn't just about blood ties. It's about finding the people who truly matter, even if they were strangers just yesterday. Sometimes the longest journeys lead us right where we were meant to be all along.